Pleasure to have Fabrice here. Fabrice Florin is yet another one of these people who doesn't really need much of an introduction. He's let's see, formerly from the computer gaming world, Macromedia, Apple Computer, decided that it was more important to save social discourse, journalism, and civilization at large, and has embarked on this mission by founding NewsTrust. I'm not actually kidding about those ambitions, and he's not the only person who thinks that this is the way to do it. He has, backing from MacArthur Foundation, Craig Newmark of Craig's List, and I know there were like half a dozen
Sunlight
other
Foundation.
Sunlight. So a lot of people are convinced that this is the right way to go, and Fabrice is here to enlist some more of us as true believers. Welcome, Fabrice.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming here. I'd like to thank our host first and foremost, David Pablo Cohn, who's believed in us since the beginning, and it's great to have his support, as well as Ashok Parikh, who's also our co-host. I really appreciate your help. I'd also like to thank Mike Dixon. Mike was kind enough in 2005, when we were just getting started with this project, to help us out and provide some advice. And through the years, every once in a while, he'll give us a little tidbit, a little pointer that will help us improve the service. And I'm very grateful to Mike and to everybody else on the Google News team who's been helping us out along the way. Josh Cohen is another one, too, who's been very, very helpful. I'd also like to introduce two members of our team. The first one is David Fox, who is our technology director. David single-handedly coded a lot of what you're seeing today. So this wouldn't exist if it wasn't for him. Since then, we now have a larger engineering team, but we're extremely grateful. There would be no NewsTrust if it wasn't for David. And then Kezar Kampwala over here is our associate editor. Kezar is the one who every day makes sure that the site looks great, that it's filled with content, keeps a vigilant eye on our members, makes sure that they understand the basic principles of news review. And overall, I want to thank probably another 8 people on the team who, even though they often work on a freelance basis as a second job, that little team is what makes NewsTrust happen. And I want to thank you for taking the time in your busy day to come and join us. What we're going to do today is a couple things. First, before we start, I would encourage any of you who haven't been to the NewsTrust site to go to newstrust.net and to perhaps, if you don't mind, click on the sign up button and sign up as a member. It'll make it easier for you later to be able to understand how the site works if you're signed in as a member. A lot of the site's functionality is invisible until such time as you do sign up. The other thing is, for those of you who are interested in adding NewsTrust to your iGoogle page, just go to this URL, go/newstrust-gadget, and you can add the NewsTrust gadget to your iGoogle. And hope it'll add the value to your page. This is what we're doing today. Now, some of you are just here for the Tech Talk, which is only an hour long, from 2 to 3. But some of you are actually staying for the second part, which is at 3 o'clock, we're going to do a small group Salon, where we're going to take an article and we're going to review it together. Reviewing an article as a group is a really fascinating experience. We always learn something from it, even those of us who are seasoned reviewers. So if you have a little bit of time and you'd like to really see how it happens, I encourage you to stay for the 3 o'clock Salon. But in the meantime, what we're going to do is we're going to do a little presentation for about a half an hour, and then we're going to do Q&A. And we don't claim to have all of the answers. In fact, we may only have some of the answers, but we have a lot of the questions. And so we're looking for feedback from you. With this, we're only a couple years old, so with these first few baby steps that we've taken, how do we expand, how do we extend the value of the service? So look forward to discussing that with you later. But now, as far as the presentation, the first thing is that we're a social news network. That means that we're an online community of people who care about good journalism. And good journalism, we think, is important because in a democracy, citizens need quality information in order to make the right decisions when they go and vote. And the way they get that information is through journalism. So unlike other social news sites, we do not focus on popularity. Is it cool or is it not cool? But rather we ask ourselves, is this article good journalism? And we have a methodology for figuring out if it's good or not. So it's much deeper evaluation than what you might find on your typical social news sites. We're nonprofit, which is also quite unusual. And the reason is because we care about the public's interest. We want to help the public first. The shareholders are not our primary focus. And we offer 3 primary services. First one is the quality news feeds, which essentially are the top-rated stories that you find on our site or in our RSS feeds, on our gadgets, in our email newsletters. It's basically a digest of interesting stories that we think would help you as a citizen. The second one is the news literacy tools. Essentially, our review form is like a little checklist that guides you through the evaluation process by asking you some questions so that you, for yourself, can tell whether you're dealing with good information or dealing with misinformation. And last but not least, the entire service helps build trust between factions of the public that have been pointing the fingers at each other, or between the public and the media. By having this thoughtful exchange and evaluation process based on facts, not just opinions, we believe that we can rebuild trust that's been lost in recent years. We're very lucky to have such a wonderful team. And again, some of the names that are listed here, it's just a partial list. But you'll recognize many of the names. So we've got a mix of experienced journalists, great technologists, educators, and other digital media leaders. So whether it's Craig Newmark or our own Mike Dixon or Howard Reingold, all of these advisors have done wonderful work with us to help us develop this project. My own background is I was at Apple Computer at the Apple Multimedia Lab. We're the first ones to do multimedia in the early 80s. We helped launch QuickTime and HyperCard and did high-level partnerships with the BBC and National Geographic, Lucasfilm, Smithsonian to help use multimedia for education purposes. And then I subsequently was brought into Macromedia to help monetize their traffic. They had all these people downloading the Flash plugins, but they were just sending them back to where they came from and not doing anything with this. And so they asked me if I could help, and that was a really easy one. What we did was aggregate all the best Shockwave games and Flash cartoons and interactive music pieces all in one place. And it was just a wonderful experience. After 2 years, we had 15 million registered members, huge traffic, profitable, and all with a team of 6 people. So we've been able to apply some of these lessons to this venture. And so a couple of years ago when I turned 50, I asked myself, it was a wonderful career. I've been very lucky. How can I give back to society? And I asked my friends, I said, I can work pro bono for a couple of years. How can I be of value? And everybody said journalism. Journalism is going through a rapid transformation, and we need people with good organizational skills to help out. So why don't you look at that? And from that came NewsTrust, and from all these wonderful people. Our partners, we're more and more starting to partner with media organizations like Frontline, WGBH, Global Voices, Huffington Post, Instapundit on the right. We try to balance it out so that they have different people. And Scientific American, Slate, and more universities. This is, again, a partial list. Very, very lucky to have the support of MacArthur Foundation, multi-year support. And Google, there again. You guys have this wonderful Google Grants program, which is really, really helpful. And we're really blessed that companies like yours have the foresight to support nonprofit like ours. And we're very grateful for all this support. Even though we're still a little nonprofit startup, we're starting to gain traction. Now, here is the challenge that we all face in this sector. We're facing some huge transformations, some big market forces like the explosion of new media, the consolidation of big media, and the decline of public trust. And these big market forces have all sorts of different effects. Having so many websites and blogs out there feeds into the problem of information overload. The average citizen is deluged with so much information. The rise of amateur journalism, although we like it, in general I think it's a great thing, can also introduce some issues. For example, more misinformation can be fed into the system by people who are new at the practice of journalism and who make mistakes due to lack of discipline. The big media consolidation is clearly, we've all heard about the newsroom cutbacks, and this is certainly a very concerning issue for a lot of folks. And even more concerning is the rise of opinion news. It turns out that opinion news is a lot more profitable if you're operating a media business than just doing this old-fashioned objective journalism. Opinion news will get you a lot more traction because people basically prefer to hear what they want to hear. So if you give people what they want to hear, something that matches their opinions, your profit margin goes up. So it's inevitable that with all the pressure from Wall Street, that many media organizations are now trying to support opinion news, and we see that as feeding another problem, which is the problem of mistrust. And then the decline of public trust. Citizens are just faced with so much change and so much turmoil that they're not sure how to act, and so either they'll join the culture wars, feeding more mistrust, or they'll disengage completely. They'll say, well, I'm just one person, I can't make a difference, I'm just going to tune out. And the problem of civic apathy is a serious one, and we find that to one degree or another, NewsTrust offers some solutions to each of these problems. For information overload, we offer a news filter. To address misinformation, we give you a tool so you can tell for yourself if you're dealing with bad information. To address mistrust, we have a reputation database where we keep track of all the sources and, that we review on our site, and you can find out whether you can trust this blog or not if you don't know about them. And then the whole service helps citizens find their voice. A lot of people say, I'm not a writer, I'm not a blogger, but anyone can be a reviewer. It's not that hard, and we coach you, we train you, we encourage you to do that, and in the process you can find your voice as a citizen, a voice of reason, we hope, rather than a voice of hate and division. More and more, as we go deeper and deeper into this project, we're finding that news literacy is a very, very important issue. All of us, in our little brains, lack some of the tools required for dealing with the rapid evaluation of so much information coming at us every day. And there's a tendency for all of us, no one's immune as far as I can tell, is a tendency to take a lazy shortcut. You see an article, you scan it in seconds because you don't have any time, and you see something in the article that quotes somebody saying something that you happen to agree with. Immediately we say, oh, well, I agree with that, therefore it's got to be a good article. And we skip the steps of weighing the evidence, examining the sources, etc., and we just go straight to, it matches my belief, therefore it's got to be good, therefore I'm going to email it to 100 of my friends to say, see, I was right. That's the attitude that we're trying to tone down. We're trying to encourage all of us to become good at rapidly evaluating information on its own merits, not necessarily by comparing it with our pre-existing beliefs. And so that whole process, which is essentially the process of critical thinking, is the one that we try to encourage, and we try to find ways to make it quick, but still make it effective. This is the home page of NewsTrust on a typical day. You can see that the top-rated stories surface to the top. And those are stories that have been evaluated by our members. We have a new topic every week. It could be presidential election, it could be the environment. And you can see who's reviewed recently. And if you want to, you can click on any of the titles to go straight to the article on the original content provider's site. But should you be interested in reviewing the article, you can click on any of the green Review It buttons, and that makes our review form pop up. So we have on the left the review form, and on the right we have the original article on the site that it came from. Now you're seeing the full review form. If you're just getting started, we're going to give you a much shorter form with just fewer questions, but for purposes of presentation, I'm showing you all the questions here. And the first one that we ask is, do you recommend the story? And what we're trying to do here is basically capture the popularity metric, the thumbs up, thumbs down, just to get it out of the way. The second one is, do you trust this source? Turns out that if we trust the New York Times, it greatly influences our judgment. And so we want to know that if the person trusts the source in the first place. And so we can later calibrate their rating based on that information. Next, is this story informative? Did you learn something you didn't know? And all of them are on the same scale, 1 to 5. Is the story fair? Is the reporter taking sides? Or are they presenting both sides of the story? How about the sourcing? Are there multiple sources? Are there primary sources or secondary sources? Are they named or not named? Sourcing is very important. Context, does the reporter zoom out and show you the big picture so you can understand why this news article is relevant? What about evidence? Is this based on factual evidence? Is it linked? Is it verifiable? That's also a really important one. And of course, importance, is this a topic that's important for the public interest? Are the key viewpoints represented? Is the story relatively balanced? And how about the style? Presentation matters. So these are the key questions. Again, we only ask a couple when you're just getting started. But by what we're finding out from our research is that the more questions we answer, the better our rating is. And I'll show you some of the research based on that. So we encourage people to answer. You can add a comment, hit the submit button, and your review appears on the review page along with others. Now, there is one difference, though, is that we have the concept of featured reviewers. Our best reviewers, the most trusted reviewers, always get quoted first. So instead of being a chronological comments, we try to emphasize the reviewers we trust the most, and I'll tell you more about this later. So that helps reduce some of the comment spam that you find on many sites. You can see our collective ratings here. You can see that in this particular case, this story was really well rated with a 3.9 average, almost 4 stars. Its only weakness was on style, and we can forgive that. That's not always the case. A 3.9 is hard to get on NewsTrust. Now, not only do we rate the articles, but we also keep track of all of the story ratings for particular sources. So the Huffington Post, for example, has earned a 3.3 average for about 280 reviews that we had done at the time that this screenshot was taken. You can see that overall, their ratings are pretty good, but there's a weakness with balance. And there's a little bit of weakness on the fairness as well, and maybe the context. And if you look at the source info, our reviewers, 67% of our reviewers feel that the Huffington Post leans left. And generally speaking, we think that they're correct. And also there's useful information about the fact this is a private corporation. Ownership issues are really important. And so this is a great page to go to if you just read a blog you had never heard about, and you want to find out if it's a trustworthy blog. You go to NewsTrust and see if it's reviewed. And they'll give you some information that will be helpful, we hope. Not only do we rate the articles, not only do we rate the sources and publications, but we also rate the raters. And that is essential to this process. So here you see the member profile for Mike Labonte, who's been on the site for 2 years. And during that time, he has earned our trust. You can see he's got a 4.5 average member level. And the way he's earned it is his activity level is really good, so he gets the site. His experience level, not so strong. He's an engineer, but he does not have, he's not a journalist or a special content expert. But he makes up for that by the fact that he gets very high ratings from other members who find his reviews thoughtful. His transparency level is also quite high. He's telling us a lot about himself and his politics. Note that we require everybody to identify themselves with their real name unless there's a real strong reason not to. We think that too often people will hide behind a pseudonym and they won't act in the same mature fashion than they would if their real name was provided. So we encourage everybody to use their real names. And then the last rating here, which is probably the most important, is validation by our staff. As soon as someone becomes active on NewsTrust, our staff will validate them. We do a 15 to 20 minute check. We look to see that they are using their real name. We check the email address, the website that they're giving us. We look for partisan gaming. Is this person consistently giving 5 stars to liberal publications and 1 stars to conservatives in a systematic way? If we catch any issues like the partisan gaming, we'll send them a nice email saying, thank you so much for reviewing on the site. We really appreciate it, but we note that there seems to be a misunderstanding about why we're doing this. We're not here to persuade each other. We're here to try to help each other find quality information. So please, let's check our ideology at the door, and let's just look at the information on its own merits. And often, that little email is enough to see a marked difference. And if it's not, then we'll email again, or we'll then call them on the phone, et cetera, et cetera. The reason this is important is because every time a NewsTrust reviewer rates a story on our site, we weigh their rating based on their member level. So if you have a high member level, your vote counts a lot more. If you've got a low member level, you can rate all you want. You have a negligible impact on the system. And that's one of the methodologies that we use to reduce the impact of gaming. Community at a glance. Right now, we're only about a year and a half old, and we're still in beta. The types of people we've attracted tend to match public broadcasting demographics. Fairly high levels of education, a fairly mature audience, although we're getting more and more young adults. We're very lucky to have so many journalists in our midst. That makes a huge difference. Every time you get a journalist and a citizen to work together, there's a really wonderful win-win situation going on. The politics are tilting to the left. This is not intentional. We're trying to restore that. We've already brought it back a bit, and we think over time, by partnering with large media organizations, we'll be able to be more representative of the country we serve and the population as a whole. Here's the structure of our trust network. It's a pyramid shape. Everybody starts at the bottom as a visitor. Then you sign in as a member. And then one day you say, you know what, I'm going to try to review a story, see what all the hoopla is about. At that point, you come on our radar, and we start validating you. If you get a validation level of 3 or more, and the quality of your work is consistent, you may get invited to become a host. A host is a special member of the NewsTrust community that basically has editing privileges, a little bit like Wikipedia. You can go and edit any page on our site that has a factual error. For example, let's say we miscategorize a story as an opinion when it's really a news report, or say the information on the Huffington Post page was incorrect. A host can go in and correct that error. But they have to earn our trust first, as opposed to just doing what Wikipedia is doing to open it up to everybody. We have a validation process. A host can host a topic, can also host new members. They can host a source or a publication, and they can participate in our bi-weekly phone calls. We have nationwide conference calls where we get hosts to talk about what should we cover next week and answer any questions that they have. And someday they may even become an editor for an entire section. And our little teeny staff orchestrates all this. Now, a little bit about the science behind NewsTrust. We wanted to find out, is it possible to trust citizens to conduct this kind of thorough evaluation? And what we did is conduct a series of blind tests. 1,000 reviewers at a time would receive an email from us saying, please review this article by using our tool and answering these questions. And we divided 1,000 reviewers into 4 groups. The first group, shown in green, was given the original version of an average news report. And lo and behold, collectively, they gave it an average rating. The second group, unbeknownst to them, was given a degraded version of that same article. We removed a couple facts. We introduced some inaccuracies. We introduced a conservative or liberal bias. We took some named sources and turned them anonymous. And by and large, even though the difference was subtle, we would put all the flaws in paragraph 4, 5, 6, so that maybe we might not have caught it on the first read. By and large, the citizen reviewers were able to tell a difference. And we've done this test over and over again, and we always get that pattern. So this suggests to us that it is possible to trust citizens to accurately evaluate the quality of journalism. Well, of course, we'll conduct more tests to see if it holds with the general public. Yeah?
Were the people doing this test aware of that they were running an experiment?
The question is, were the people running this test aware that they were participating in this experiment? And the answer is no. We did not tell them that there was a degraded version. We didn't tell them that there was a placebo. We just said,
but
please.
With this uncommon behavior, do they usually get emails? Or do they usually do it on the site? And if they
people do, this was even before there was a site. Before we started building it, we wanted to find out, can we actually trust this? So we did extensive research for about a year before even doing a single line of code to find out whether the field was ripe, whether it was even feasible to do this. No, they did not know that that was the case. I think later, in some cases, we let people know what actually happened, but in most cases, it was truly a blind test. Now, here's an interesting chart where again, it's a thinking tool. It's not based on scientific data, but it's our interpretation of where all the organizations that purport to filter the news or evaluate journalism, where do they stand against these two axes? The vertical axis is the depth of the review. Is the organization doing a full review, or are they doing no review at all? And then the second axis is the expertise of the reviewer. Is this someone who's a professional, or is this someone who really doesn't have that much expertise? And when we tried to distribute all the various organizations in our universe, we ended up with two bubbles. On the top right is what we call the quality bubble. And there we have organizations like AP, Reuters, and the New York Times who do a fairly thorough evaluation of their own content before they publish it. They get a lot of grief, but in reality, their editorial processes are pretty advanced. But they only do their own content, so that doesn't really help the rest of the content. You have a few nonprofits like Fact Check or Journalism.org that will occasionally do a check on someone else's content. But they employ paid professionals, usually a small team of just a few people. And so, although the quality of their work is fantastic, they really can get it, it doesn't scale up. Journalism.org will do once a year, top 10 markets, 3 newspapers, 3 TV stations. It doesn't cover the universe of news that's coming out. So as good as it is, it's not scalable. Now, on this end, we have what we call the popularity bubble. And this is where you find sites that do just a short review like Dig or Yahoo or Reddit or Delicious, which is essentially a bookmark. And you get results from that, but the results are essentially a popularity metric. What you get is a lot of people seem to like that story, but it doesn't tell you a lot about the quality of its information. So although it's hugely cost effective, because you've got millions of volunteers working for nothing, and you're getting a lot of data from lots of people, the quality of the data is not necessarily useful to a citizen trying to figure out whether they can base their decision on that particular piece of information. So what we try to do at NewsTrust is we try to bring the best of both worlds together by basically taking the best practices of these professional organizations, bringing them into the mainstream, taking members of the public that have no expertise, and encouraging them to gain some expertise as citizen reviewers. And we believe anyone can be a reviewer. Now, more and more, what we're doing is we're doing partnerships with media organizations. In this case, we're showing the Huffington Post, with whom we're going to be working in a few weeks. But other organizations include, for example, Scientific American. A couple weeks ago, we partnered with Scientific American for 1 week. And together we encourage their readers and the members of our community, as well as students from the University of Nevada at Reno, to join forces to find great journalism about the environment. So for 1 week, we all went around, looked for great articles about the environment. A week later, on Earth Day, we announced the results. And everybody got something out of it. Scientific American got a little bit more thoughtful Web 2.0 activity. They engaged their community. The students at the University of Nevada got a chance to kind of practice their skills and get their chops on identifying good journalism. And NewsTrust got a lot of new reviewers, and it got the whole community engaged. So every week we try to do this. In a couple of weeks, we're going to do the Middle East. We're going to do it with the Council on Foreign Relations, prestigious think tank, and with Global Voices, an association of bloggers from around the world. So we try to reach out to a variety of different communities. Huffington Post, obviously, will be really interesting. And what we typically do with a partner like this is we encourage them to support the collaboration I just described, to support the news hunt that we do together, to add their review buttons next to Dig and Delicious so that their own work can be reviewed more easily, and to also add our widget on the particular topic that's being reviewed. So the widget essentially acts as a scoreboard of which stories are top rated on this particular topic at this given time. Other partners, like Slate, are just happy to take our full-page widget and just make it a little mini section on their site. They keep the advertising, we get some of the traffic. So we have both hands-on partnerships and more passive partnerships. And the purpose of all those is to keep growing the community and expanding the service, making it available in different locations. If a site does not have our buttons or widgets, as in the case of Fox News, for example, it's very easy for one of our members to still review their work by simply adding our bookmarklet, dragging it into their toolbar. Wherever they are on the web, they just click the NewsTrust bookmarklet, a little pop-up window comes up. They can either submit the story for review or rate it right here and there, and they never have to go to our site ever again, unless they want to. So taking NewsTrust with you as your little companion is a very useful idea. Someday when we grow up, we hope to be able to add value to Google News in very direct ways, either by feeding our metadata to you or maybe providing our ratings. Maybe you might want to display some of this to some of your users, user preference or something like that. And so that's our hope. It's like maybe in a couple of years when we've grown to a sufficient level that organizations like Google News and others will say, these NewsTrust guys are really getting to a point where we really should get serious about working with them. And that's how we can have a huge impact on a really broad audience. And just a few little things here. It says coming soon, but we just launched on Monday our Google Gadget. So you can see the Google Gadget is pretty cool. One of the differentiators for the Google Gadget versus, say, the Dig Gadget is we separate news from opinion. We saw that was something that none of the gadgets on iGoogle offered that. So we thought, well, that'll be our contribution. We'll separate news from opinion. And of course, you can access a variety of topics. And if you're already signed in on the site, you can just review the story right off the Review It button right here. So it's just basically a little piece of our site that you can put on your iGoogle page right here at this URL. Here's what's next later in the year. We want to have a news literacy guide, which will be like a little fun little quiz that will give you a statement or a quote. And we'll ask you simple questions to test your news literacy. Say, is this an opinion or is this a factual report? So you can look at that quote and try to determine for yourself, whether or not you think it's an opinion. And if you want to, you can still review the whole article, but we realize that people's time is short and not everybody has 10 minutes to review a story. And this is something you can answer in less than a minute. And then hopefully, if in the process we can help members of the American public tell the difference between a factual report and an opinion, that's a huge win. And in fact, it's central to our mission. Our mission, remember, is to help citizens make more informed decisions. And one of the ways that towards that goal is knowing the difference between opinion and fact. Huge difference, and you'd be surprised how many people actually are not completely clear on that concept. We keep streamlining the review form and simplifying it. Even this is actually it's an old screen. I probably shouldn't be showing it anymore. But the new review form that'll come out later this summer will have all sorts of wonderful capabilities. It'll be customizable. Instead of asking you so many questions, we'll just ask you a few questions. We'll have a version that's really, really small, so it doesn't look overwhelming. We have the concept of separating your personal views on this issue from whether or not you think that we're dealing with reliable information. So all sorts of innovations are coming up. Stay tuned for more. Some of our educational activities. So we typically will go to a university, partner with them for a week, do a little presentation like this one, get the students to participate actively, roll up their sleeves, and then publish our findings. We'll often invite the students to blog on our site as well. So very healthy. And then more and more, we're doing NewsTrust salons, which are group discussions with small groups of people where we try to review a story together. We're finding this to be invaluable complement to the online experience. Online, we're all separate in our little isolated locations. We don't communicate as well as we can when we're face-to-face. And every time we have one of these salons, we all learn tremendously. So I hope some of you will consider staying for the second part. To summarize, we see a real need for this. There's no question. Initially we were not sure, but now we think that we add sufficient value that it's worthwhile. More and more people are adopting our services. The big finding so far is that whenever you put a citizen and a journalist together, it's a huge win for everybody concerned. Because the journalist has unique information gathering skills that they've developed throughout their career. They can impart some of those skills to citizens who are new at that practice, and the citizens can therefore become a lot more effective, and they can amplify the journalist expertise by applying it to a much wider content area. So as much as possible, we try to get citizens and journalists to cooperate rather than be far apart. And this is part of the trust building that we do in very simple ways. So it's a little sort of summary pitch of ways that if you think that this is a worthwhile goal, ways that you could help. The first one is go to our site and sign up. And we have a special sign up for Google employees. I recommend you use that one because we're giving you a higher validation level right off the bat. Just because you're Google employees. There's a certain level of trust that you've come all the way to here to hear us. So sign up through here if you want. I think there's still a message right now that talks about the Salon. You don't have to stay for the Salon. Just sign up so that you can become part of our community. The second thing, get this is the internal URL. This is the external URL. Get the gadget. Third thing is review often. And for those of you who want to stay at 3, spread the word if you think it's worthwhile. Let your friends know. If you want to volunteer, say you're an engineer and you want to spend a few hours a month helping out, we can all use some help. Or you might just host a topic and just send us an email at host@newstrust.net if there's a topic that you'd like to host. Doesn't take much. You can be very effective with an hour or 2 a week. And then those of you who feel so inclined, we depend on the generosity of our donors and sponsors, and always appreciate a little bit of help. So I think I'm going to leave it at that and open this up for questions at this point.
Yes, very interesting talk. You've used the word citizen many times in the talk. I was wondering if you could define what you mean by that word.
Well, a citizen is essentially, someone who's part of our democracy and who gets a chance to participate, or any democracy.
Well, that's my question. You showed people in Europe. I mean, if you're an international, is there a nationalistic bias to news evaluation?
Oh, I'm sorry if no, it's not intended to be nationalistic at all. We're all citizens of the world, first and foremost. And I'm sorry if we gave the idea that that we don't intend to be nationalistic, but we all have ways as citizens, because we're almost all of us are citizens of at least one country, we have ways to participate in the democratic process by voting. And all too often, we found situations where people go and place their votes without having the full information required to make an informed decision. And we just want to help people get access to better information so that together we can make better decisions. But we're not trying to be nationalistic, and want to make that very clear.
Civic,
Okay.
and civic engagement.
Well, Can I, but you do distinguish between left and right, so maybe one suggestion I would have is it might be useful in the profile of each reviewer to record what their various citizenships
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. And by the way, just to make it really clear, I'm French and I'm an American citizen at the same time. Just to make it very clear, I'm not favoring either country, but I vote in both democracies. And I'm very grateful to NewsTrust. It's helped me make some difficult decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it'd be interesting to be able to see
Yeah.
how the reviews broke down on that
It's a great point.
variable.
For practical reasons, we're putting more emphasis in the US right now because we're still developing the site. And we will roll out international versions in different languages, but probably not until 2009. We're just still debugging the platform, and so we can't export the platform until it's finished. But as soon as we do, you'll see a much more international scope, and we'll definitely take your recommendation of finding out the nationality of the members. Thank you.
In your, when people review, they say whether they trust the source or not. Do you find any correlation between the quality, like average quality of articles that a source publishes, and the average trust that people put into it?
There sometimes is. We're all influenced by whom we trust. And there is often a tendency for someone who trusts a publication to want to favor that publication. But we find that the process itself will often cause, if you're genuine about it and if you're thoughtful as a reviewer, you will sometimes find that although you really trust the New York Times, that in this case, this particular article is not well sourced. And so although my initial intention was I trust the New York Times, therefore it's got to be a good article. That's my initial assumption. I go in and then I answer a couple more questions. And lo and behold, I find out, wait a second, the prestigious New York Times didn't do a very good job. And this little conservative blog, which initially I didn't trust so much, did a very good job. Multiple sources, very factual. So often we have epiphanies where we discover that a source we didn't trust is in fact trustworthy and vice versa. So every time you answer an additional question, you get closer to the truth. And our goal is to get you to ask yourself these additional questions. Yep.
Hi. I had a question about audience, both, in sort of two different buckets. The people who are reading this, your viewers, as you said, sort of the bottom level, who aren't even necessarily registered members, and then up to the next level as to how people graduate to become actual reviewers. Because I think this is sort of a cycle where part of the reason we're in this predicament is that there's so much information and people don't have time that they are not willing to invest the time to even read an article closely enough to determine whether or not it's biased or well reported. So who do you see as your target audience for people who are actually willing to put in the time to take the time to review these articles? How are you reaching them, and yeah, that's basically.
Well, initially we're starting with concerned citizens that have an interest in democracy because it's a good starting point for getting early adopters. But eventually we hope that as we come up with mini review forms and fun little quiz and little applications that are not so daunting, we hope to attract the general public in bigger ways. And this is why it's so important for us to be talking to organizations like the Washington Post and others, because they have the potential to basically open the process to a much broader audience. And so for that audience, we, instead of asking them to do a full review, we'll most likely give them a fun little quiz or just a little gadget or just something easy to just get them to, maybe I'll read this article. But you are correct that reading the article is 85% of the total review time. So, in fact, the review process itself is not that lengthy, but it's reading the article or watching the broadcast or listening to the audio story that takes the longest. But if we can cause more people to do that and to read or watch or listen to thoughtful material, then we all win.
So there are a number of groups online that believe in various sort of either conservative agendas or the environmental lobby or the oil lobby or whatever your political philosophy is, right? Like how easy it is for these groups to sort of gang up and game or poison the reports. They can all go in and say, let's look at Fox News reports and give bad reviews to things coming out of Fox or other agendas like that. How easy or difficult do you think it is?
Well, obviously gaming is a big obstacle to our success. It's one that we need to get really good at. We think that our current validation process is a very serious obstacle to people who want to game the process, because you can sign up if you want to, but your validation level is going to remain at 1 until such time as you demonstrate to us that you have the qualities of objectivity and thoughtfulness that we expect from a reviewer. So even if 10,000 people sign up, if they have a validation of 1, they're not going to have as much influence as the trusted members who have a 4. The other thing is we're looking to developing the algorithm further to introduce the concept of what we call balanced ratings, which means that for ratings that are really important, and particularly when there's lots of reviewers involved, we will take, equal amounts of people from the left, right, and center to prevent any party, whether it's an extremist on the right or an extremist on the left, from gaming the system. So the balanced rating will be a bit similar to what the pollsters use to balance their polls, and we hope to introduce this by the end of the year as a further prevention. Of course, we'll keep adding new ways to prevent gaming. And we realize that that's probably our largest obstacle. But the good news is our methodology is based on a thoughtful evaluation, not only of the journalism, but also of the reviewer. Our goal, and in fact, the most important part of our mission is not to be a news aggregator. That's a means to an end. And the end is to get all of us to increase our news literacy skills, become more discriminating readers, and to become more informed citizens. And we have methodologies for accomplishing that goal that most of the first generation news sites or social sites do not have. Yes?
What's your coverage of reviews for news articles? So if you get 100 articles in a day, what percentage of that is actually reviewed by your good readers?
Typically, at least 80% of a day's articles will be reviewed by some of our most trusted reviewers. In other words, they're a little bit like Wikipedians, 200 Wikipedians, so they say, built the bulk of Wikipedia English. And in a similar way, at NewsTrust, we've got a couple hundred people really, really active. And these guys are avid news readers, and they'll try to get as many as they can. So we're very lucky that we almost always have one trusted reviewer on one of the reviews.
Since you know so much, since you have information about users and their profiles, have you guys looked at doing like NewsTrust recommendations, things like these are sources you might like, these are articles you might like based on things you've reviewed, based on your political leanings, your whatever information you provided?
Yeah, we're starting to do that. Already today's picks is the beginning of our recommendation service. It's part algorithm, part editorial, meaning our editorial stuff can nudge stories up there's an editorial priority. Also, one of the things that we hope to do is hopefully sometime in the fall to have on our topic pages the list of recommended sources for that topic. So we'll say based on our experience on the topic of war in Iraq, there's been very thoughtful coverage from the following sources, which in itself, recommending sources is not a bad way to go. And actually, if you go to our site and you click on sources, you'll see our most trusted sources are also recommended. So those are sources that by and large have held up pretty well, throughout about 1.5 years of evaluation. And then, so we'll recommend sources, but we'll also recommend stories.
So I assume that you're getting your initial stories for the reviewers using some sort of automated process. Or is it all through submissions?
It's all manual submissions, believe it or not. I know it's anathema at Google, but
okay.
We currently do not have an auto submission process. However, one of the things we're talking to partners about is starting to do some auto submission to make it easier to submit. Because right now, even though I'm pretty fast or Kazar is pretty fast, we can submit a story in about a minute. A person who's just getting started, it could take them 2 or 3 minutes to submit a story. And so obviously that's a lot of time. So we will look at auto submissions now that we have trusted sources. That's, we're starting to get some guidelines that would make it possible for us to auto submit something for review. Not auto rate, but auto submit. And so that's something we hope to have at least a first instance of auto submission by the end of the year. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yes.
Yep.
What's your plan for long-term funding?
Our hope is that we can generate sufficient traffic with the help of our partners so that we can monetize that traffic in a traditional manner through a combination of online sponsorships, a little bit of online advertising, judiciously done, premium memberships so that people can donate like they do for NPR, and in return for that they get a few bells and whistles like a personalized news feed, and B2B licensing where we license our news feed and customize it if need be for big partners that have a need for it, or do a rev share. Like for example, in a year or so from now, we're going to go back to Slate. We're going to say, hey, you've enjoyed the freebie for 2 years. How about splitting a little bit of that ad revenue with us? So right now, most of the revenue sources are traffic-based. So we need to first build our traffic through our partners. Once we got enough traffic, then we can monetize it. And in the meantime, we're lucky enough that MacArthur and a couple other foundations are willing to provide us essentially the startup capital to build a nonprofit up to the level. But we will try to, even though it's a nonprofit, we want to apply some business techniques to the extent that they don't conflict with our mission to operate it like a business so it can be sustainable.
So you mentioned in the beginning that one of the challenges today is that more and more publications are seeing opinion-based reporting to be more profitable. Now, assuming that by driving more traffic to fact-based articles, you could help change that a little bit, but if that's the direction we're moving, won't that be a problem for something like NewsTrust, given that there'll just be less and less fact-based articles being published? Aren't you too late in the cycle already?
Well, it's a very interesting question. Are we too late in the cycle, given that the rise of opinion news is already on the way to make a difference? I don't think we're too late, and I think, in fact, even if the entire media sphere, the entire news and information industry were to become one large opinion news system, I still think that the NewsTrust service would be of value, because you can use the NewsTrust system to evaluate an opinion not just a factual report. And being able to identify the opinion pieces that are the most factual is in itself valuable. So say, listen, you've been gorging on opinions from this source, and time after time, every time we check these opinions, we find that they're not based on facts, that they're in violation of some core principles of journalism. We recommend you stay away from that opinion source. But this opinion source is, in fact, generally factual, generally well-sourced. They generally present the other sides of the argument respectfully. It is possible to have an opinion piece that's thoughtful and fact-based. Opinions by nature are not bad, but certain opinions who ignore the basic tenets of information gathering, those opinion pieces are unhealthy. By the way, another really interesting thing that is going to become possible for us very soon is because we keep track of what you're reviewing, what you're clicking on, we're actually quite aware about what your particular news habits tend to be. And we thought that at some point we may be able to offer some type of a Weight Watchers service where, our view is that, many Americans are intellectually obese, particularly nowadays you can get whatever you want, whenever you want, through the magic of the internet. And so we might be able to observe to someone and say, listen, we've noticed that you've been gorging yourself on opinions, comedy news, and the lowest of the lowest form of factual information. Might you consider adding a little bit of spinach to your diet? Not too much. Candy is okay, but what we might propose is maybe if you added 10% factual thing and 10% of this, news analysis, you might actually be able to broaden your perspective. In all due respect, of course. It's not up to us to recommend to people to do things. But still, the information as food metaphor is actually useful for thinking about this problem. The internet, for all its wonderful blessings, has made it possible for us to get only what we want to get and not what we need to get. And it's nice to have a neutral authority, just like when you go to see your doctor, the doctor suggests, a slight adjustment on your diet. It's possible that NewsTrust could play a role should our members be interested in that service. Yep.
Is there any reason in the long run to restrict yourself to just news sources? Or like in general website evaluation, that sort of thing would be very useful.
It's quite likely that we could actually add value in many other fields. We started in news because it has such a huge influence on how citizens vote. But obviously in the financial field, in the health field, in the travel field, the same techniques could be applied. The techniques of journalism are really the techniques of good information gathering. And in fact, many of the principles that I just pointed out to you are the principles of good citizenship. As a citizen, it's important for me to be fair. It's important for me to try to look for factual information. It's important for me to look at multiple sources in order to reach a decision. So even though we have started with news, the potential impact of the system could be much greater. But, we've got to start with small steps, and we've got our hands full already with news. But if, in fact, we are successful in a couple of years, it's quite obvious that we could apply this in other areas as well. Yep.
I know it's late, but could you quickly say what your model is for review of reviewers? Like, do the top level guys review the next level guys and so on and so forth? Is that how it's happening?
Yeah, the idea is that currently the way it's going on, because we've got a small community, is we have a small staff of 9 people, and about a third of us are involved in member validations. So we take turns validating people. But we're starting to train some of our most trusted hosts to potentially start taking on that role. So that eventually the trusted hosts will do the validation for new members that are just mildly active. And then eventually we'll be able to even extend that even further. But we're being very careful. We're pursuing just one step after another on all these opportunities. And also the sad thing about nonprofit and the nonprofit sector is there's just so little funding in this sector that we move a lot more slowly than a for-profit organization. We're outspent at least 20 to 1 by the nearest for-profit competitor. And this is why we depend on the generosity of our partners to help us out and take a little bit of the workload so it's not all on our shoulders. But that said, it is possible to operate it, and even though it takes us longer to get there than if we were for-profit, because we're very focused on our mission, we don't end up to be so dependent on the vagaries of the market. We just stay the course. We've been doing the same thing for 3 years, and it keeps getting better all the time. So, well, thank you so much for your great questions, your great attention.
Thank you.